Right now, at this exact moment, flowing through your veins, is a synthetic, toxic chemical that did not exist on this planet a century ago. It is in your blood. It is in the blood of polar bears in the Arctic. It is in the blood of deep-sea marine life. And it is in the blood of 99% of every living, breathing human being on Earth. This isn't some natural phenomenon. It was put there deliberately, and it will remain there forever. You can't sweat it out, you can't filter it out. It is known as a forever chemical. And the story of how it got inside you is one of the most terrifying, calculated corporate cover-ups in human history. It is a story of astronomical greed, decades of lies, and a household convenience that came at an unimaginable cost. This is the story of DuPont, the invention of Teflon, and how one of the most trusted brands in America prioritized billions in profit over the survival of the human race. To understand how we all got poisoned, we have to go back to a completely accidental discovery. In 1938, a chemist at DuPont named Roy Plunkett stumbled upon a slippery, white substance. It was virtually frictionless. It resisted heat, water, and caustic chemicals. They called it polytetrafluoroethylene, or, as the marketing department would famously rebrand it, Teflon. At first, Teflon was highly classified, used in the Manhattan Project to seal radioactive pipes. But soon DuPont realized they were sitting on a domestic gold mine. By the 1950s, Teflon was being applied to frying pans, promising the American housewife an end to the nightmare of scrubbing burnt food. The happy pan flew off shelves. DuPont was minting money, cementing its reputation as an innovator. But there was a dark, horrific secret hiding behind their catchy slogans, one that was deliberately kept hidden from the public, the government, and the very workers manufacturing the product. Creating this miracle non-stick coating required a highly specific, man-made chemical compound to smooth out the lumps during the manufacturing process. It was called perfluorooctanoic acid, commonly referred to as PFOA, or simply C8. The 8 refers to its unbreakable chain of 8 carbon atoms surrounded by fluorine. It is a chemical bond so incredibly strong that nature literally has no mechanism to break it down. When it enters the environment, it stays there. When it enters the human body, it accumulates. DuPont bought C8 from 3M with explicit internal warnings that it was toxic and should never be flushed into surface waters. But Teflon was becoming a billion-dollar cash cow. Properly disposing of the volatile waste would cut into profit margins. So DuPont made a choice. For decades, at their massive Washington Works plant in West Virginia, DuPont recklessly pumped hundreds of thousands of pounds of C8 straight into the Ohio River. They dumped thousands of tons of toxic sludge into unlined pits directly above the town's drinking water aquifer. And they knew exactly how deadly this chemical was. How do we know they knew? Because DuPont was quietly conducting horrifying experiments on their own workers. By the 1960s, internal company documents showed that animals exposed to C8 developed massively enlarged livers and lethal tumors. Instead of halting production, they moved to human testing when they discovered that female workers on the Teflon line were giving birth to babies with severe facial deformities. DuPont quietly moved the women out of the department, buried the data, and never informed the workers. One plant worker gave birth to a son born with only half a nose and severe respiratory defects. DuPont vehemently denied any connection. In secret internal memos, executives discussed the C8 toxicity openly, noting the chemical was present in the local water supply at levels vastly exceeding their own safety guidelines. Yet, in public, they smiled and sold more pans. The cover-up was perfect. It was airtight. Until they messed with the wrong farmer. Wilbur Tennant was a cattle farmer whose family had worked land in West Virginia for generations. In the 1980s, Wilbur sold a piece of his property to DuPont, who claimed they just needed a place to dispose of harmless ash. Soon after, a foul, frothy, unnatural green water began running through the creek where Wilbur's cattle drank. His cows began to act violently insane. They developed blackened teeth, massive tumors, and their internal organs turned neon green. calves were born hideously mutated. Over 100 of his cows died in agony. When Wilbur tried to sound the alarm, he was completely stonewalled. Everyone was either on DuPont's payroll or terrified to cross the region's largest employer. Armed with nothing but a camcorder, Wilbur filmed the gruesome deaths of his livestock. In sheer desperation, he reached out to a corporate defense attorney in Cincinnati named Rob Bilott. Bilott was a guy who normally defended giant chemical companies. But after seeing the videotapes, something shifted. Bilott took the case, thinking it would be a simple nuisance claim. He had no idea he was about to unravel one of the biggest corporate crimes in history. Bilott forced DuPont to hand over their internal documents through the legal process of discovery. What he got was hundreds of boxes containing tens of thousands of pages of secret memos, internal medical reports, and damning scientific studies dating back half a century. Sitting on the floor of his office, Bilott found the smoking gun. He found the paper trail proving that DuPont had known for over 40 years that C8 was a lethal bioaccumulative toxin. He found the memos showing they chose to dump it into the drinking water anyway, because the alternative would have cost them money. He found out they had been monitoring the public water supply, watching the poison spread, and deliberately keeping it a secret. Bilott didn't just sue them for Wilbur Tennant. He blew the lid off the entire operation. He launched a class action lawsuit for 70,000 residents whose drinking water was contaminated. DuPont fought back with the unlimited resources a multi-billion-dollar empire can muster. They delayed, appealed, and demanded proof. So Bilott forced the creation of an independent scientific panel to study the blood of nearly 70,000 people, paid for by DuPont themselves. It took 7 agonizing years for the science panel to complete their work, during which more people got sick and more people died. When the results came in, they were undeniable. C8 was definitively linked to kidney cancer, testicular cancer, thyroid disease, high cholesterol, pregnancy-induced hypertension, and ulcerative colitis. DuPont's own chemical had turned the bodies of innocent people into toxic waste dumps. Ultimately, DuPont was forced to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in settlements. They phased out the use of C8. But here is the cold, terrifying reality of this story. The fines they paid were essentially a slap on the wrist, a tiny fraction of the billions they made selling Teflon over the decades. No executives went to prison for making the calculated decision to poison the planet. And while C8 is no longer used, the chemical is still out there. Because it never breaks down, every ounce of C8 ever created by DuPont is still circulating in our environment, in our water, and in our veins. They revolutionized the modern kitchen, and in exchange, they poisoned the entire world.